Karen Lee Cohen is a eight-time regional Emmy Award winner, making an impact in television in Chicago, New York, and LA. She's written a book called It's About Time. And let me tell you, the stories that she shares, it's a must-read for anybody who is interested in journalism, anyone who's in TV, or anyone who's curious about the whole process. It's so great to be chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be with you, Rudy.
So you've had a lot of family and friends throughout the years telling you should write a book and maybe sharing a story or two, but talk a little bit about the Columbia College Zoom event that kind of sparked the interest of like, all right, I'm finally going to write this book.
Absolutely. It was 2 years ago, and I'm on the Alumni Association National Board. And so we do a lot of mentoring and involvement with the college. And we were doing a Zoom interview with some graduating seniors. And I was in a Zoom room where it was for seniors who were interested in going to another state. I'm in the Los Angeles, California area. And for whatever reason, I had never done this before on a Zoom call. I decided to put one of my Emmys on the where the book is now. I had an Emmy there. And so the head of development said, why don't you start telling people about the Emmys? And so I did. I said I have, 8 regional Emmys, and the first one was in Chicago, and they all suddenly were very attentive. And one of them said, write a book about how to win an Emmy, and we'll buy it. And I laughed and I said, well, you can't really write a book about how to win an Emmy. Number one, I don't know how you would do that. And number two, I don't even think you can use it. And I found out later you cannot use the title Emmy in a book because of the trademark. But that was, and part of it, I'm sure, was the pandemic. I was doing my life was completely on Zoom. And so I started to sit down and write it. And for some reason, I was inspired to, I did my outline, but before I actually wrote the book, I wrote an email to about 75 people who I had worked with and friends and family and said, send me your memories. And I figured that would just be a fun way. I had no idea at the time how I was going to use it and if I was going to use it. And got about 50 responses, which when you read the book, you'll see. And it was fun because sometimes they matched what I remembered and sometimes they didn't, but it wasn't the point. What I decided to do in the writing process, I wrote a chapter, and at the end of the chapter, I put in other people's memories, as you'll see in the book. And that was kind of a fun way to just get more people involved in the stories and to help to jog my memory about things too. It was nice.
I want to talk a little bit about your drive because one of the things that I love in the book is your tenacity, your drive, not letting one situation stop you from applying for another job or knowing that there was always something else out there, or if something didn't lead to what you wanted, that there was something else that you could always, apply for. Talk a little about your drive and just the sense of like, here's what I want to do and not letting anything stop you. I think that's so important for this career.
Yes, as well as I do, Rudy. Well, and I kind of put it, the Midwestern work ethic is a big part of that, and my parents and just how I was raised. I mean, I kind of naturally just knew that if one thing didn't work, I needed to go on to the other. And I guess I was relatively patient considering all the twists and turns in my life. And it just, in writing the book, I got the knowledge that I really have been guided by what I would call angels and guides. Many people don't believe in that, and that's fine. And I didn't believe in that when I was going through it. But as I'm writing the book, I'm going, well, isn't that interesting? What made me do that? And what made me motivated to do that? And some of it was just the work ethic. If one thing doesn't work, you try something else. But I think I've been very blessed. I think I've been, I think the idea to have the memories absolutely came out of the ethers, where whatever those ethers might be. I call them angels and guides.
Let's talk about it. Growing up, Logan Square was their very first neighborhood, surrounded by family and friends, and now Logan Square, one of the hippest neighborhoods in Chicago. Talk a little bit about growing up there, because there's such a sense of community and such a sense of family when you think of the neighborhood of Logan Square.
And it really was. And I know it's a hip neighborhood now. It wasn't a hip neighborhood then, but it was really I was very fortunate because both my mother's and father's families, most of them lived in the area. So we were constantly watching out for each other. And there was my cousins who eventually moved to New York lived right across the alley from us. And that's, I would go talk to my cousin Charlotte and her daughter Robin. They was raised in New York, but she's like my little sister. So I was raised with that sense of family, that that's who you could count on. Your family was always there. And when I went to New York to work at WNBC TV as program director, it was wonderful because I had that family there. So not only did I grow up with them in Logan Square, they moved to New York. When I moved to New York, I was able to pursue that family, which was really, really great.
You talk a lot about the schools and the schools in Logan Square at the time. And then when you had your career at WMAQ, that you were able to come and do a feature on the school system. Talk a little bit about what that impact was to go through something and be able to bring it to television through that lens of not, something, oh, here's something that landed on my desk, I guess we'll do something, but have such a personal connection to it.
The Chicago school system used to, many, many, many years ago, allowed you to go to any high school you wanted. When you graduated from grade school, you would go to any high school. They stopped that probably the year before I was going to high school. And that totally changed the complexion of the way the school system worked and the choices you had, and it changed the neighborhoods. I mean, the people moved because they wanted their children to go to a different high school rather than stay in the neighborhood, which I believe they would have. So years later, when we were at WMAQ, when there was some kind of school crisis going on with the superintendent, and that's why we decided to do a documentary. But we were able to deal with some of those issues. And I suppose part of it was just because I had that knowledge from my own personal experience. So I think that probably helped us. So you're probably right. You perceived it more than I did. Yes.
Especially now with the morning news programs, the mid-afternoon programs, there's a lot of the highlights of the festivals and highlights of the neighborhoods. And it's become a given to see those things on morning television and on afternoon television across all the stations. But talk a little bit about the programs that you worked on, Chicago Camera and Small World, because those were the ones that really introduced this concept to Chicago. Because without the starting that that you made, we wouldn't be having that right now.
Oh, wow, Rudy. I didn't think of it that way, but the show that we did, and again, it was a station decision to do it, but I was asked to produce a show that became Chicago Camera, and Jerry G. Bishop and Linda Alvarez were our hosts. And it was just a delight because we were able to go all around Chicago. We did the impossible we didn't have satellite, we had microwave dishes. Is how we got back to the station. And it really gave us an opportunity to highlight every part of Chicago. And there was a wonderful man named Jack Reardon who was with the Park District, and he was fabulous. And he knew all the political ins and outs to help us get permits to go everywhere. And he became a dear friend. And then when Chicago Camera went off the air, we did Chicago Camera was live. We did a show called Small World, which was covering ethnic festivals. And that was a great joy, going all around Chicago doing that. And again, Jack was a big help in us getting permits, and friends and families telling us, oh, you got to cover our festival. So it was.
This is also, especially for some of the younger viewers that are watching this right now, this is before going on Instagram and going on Facebook to seeing something was going on. You had to talk to your family and friends. You had to know someone in the neighborhood. You had to read a newspaper. People still research now, but research was different at that time. So you really had to seek out something versus somebody tagging you in a post or texting you something as far as what's going on in all these neighborhoods within the city.
Oh, Rudy, that's brilliant. I didn't think of that, but yeah, you're right. You had to have connections and do a lot of walking research and driving research to find things out. Yeah.
Another thing too, especially, WFLD, people know it as Fox Now, which is, home of The Simpsons, home of American Idol. They just had the big game on the other day. There is so much that station is known for now. Talk a little bit about being a part of that.
Cliff and Marcy Braun. And I don't remember if both or only one was a Columbia College professor, but one of them worked at Columbia College. And our internship program, which still is amazing at Columbia College, I mean, that is very important to your instruction at Columbia to do a lot of interns. So virtually our students put the station on the air. We were at the Opera House, the top of the Opera House at the time. And Cliff and Marcy, I think, was the program director, and I think Cliff might have been the station manager. I don't remember exactly their titles, but they, used us, and there were no unions at the time. And so we got to do everything. I mean, literally, we got to do everything. We got to run camera, we got to stage manage, we got to, some people got to direct, and a guy named Pat Muldowney who was also a Columbia College professor, was the news anchor. So literally, I think Columbia College Chicago interns put the station on the air.
Let's talk a little bit about the power of an internship, because obviously people learn a lot in their classrooms, and anything that they do outside of school can just further their education and further their connections and further their experience. I think especially in a field like this, you really got to get your hands dirty, and just the importance of that for students.
Absolutely. And it is very important. And anybody who's watching this going to school, go to a school that really encourages and helps you get the internships. It's a little bit different. Now I think there are more paid internships. I'm not sure there were any back in the day, but we all got college credit. So there was a give and take. But it's one of the things that I love so much about Columbia, because they so encourage the internships. And it's even when I was in New York, all of the vast majority of production assistants that we hired were out of the internship program. They would come in as interns, we'd learn about them, and that's who we would hire for our production assistants. And I'm sure that still happens, and in all of your markets. That's a good way to get to know if somebody's going to work hard enough to deserve to get those entry-level jobs.
And also too, I mean, not to put a spotlight on anybody's work ethic or as far as their expectations when going in. But I know, sometimes the interns that, at my previous positions that I've had have come in, some want to do everything and want to learn everything and want to talk to every producer and every director and everybody who works on the staff. And some people have like their one goal of like, I want to be on air, or I want to do this, and like refuse to do certain tasks, or aren't interested. And sometimes that could kind of sway the decision, because when you're at an internship, everybody's looking at you. Everybody is watching your every move. Talk a little bit about the importance of, even if it may not be something in your 5-year plan or 10-year plan, about having to do those tasks to kind of work your way up.
Absolutely. You have to be willing to do it all, whether it's an entry-level position or an internship. You have to go in with the attitude that whatever you're given, even if it's just typing the rundown, or getting materials and helping getting props and that kind of thing, whatever the job is, you have to be willing to do it. And those are the people who end up getting hired. And that to me, that's the importance of the internships. You get to be seen in front of people. You have to be willing to do everything. Like you said, not everybody is.
You touch on this in the book, and I just want to get your thoughts, especially over the years, because a lot of the times when you were applying for something, you were the first woman to do so, or you were the first woman that was applying for a job, and they're like, they're not going to give this job to a woman. Talk a little bit about that, your tenacity at the time, and just like, here's what I want. I'm qualified. I'm going to go for it. And just how the industry has maybe changed over the years that, through your lens.
Yeah, I mean, what you're referring to is that literally happened to me, because you could, in those days, a program director said to me, New York would never allow me to hire a 21-year-old woman in this position, which, as you know, is very politically incorrect. It did not matter back when I was starting out. And I at the time, I was assistant to the executive producer, and it was called secretary. It wasn't called assistant in those days. And so when the executive producer left and I applied for his job, I went to the program director and I said, when he gave me the New York wouldn't allow me to hire line, I said, let me do it for 6 months and prove that I can do both jobs. I'll do my job and to his job. And at the end, and that's what I did. And I even got to produce a show with University of Chicago in between. And at the end of the 6 months, I went back to the program director and I said, "See, we're doing just fine." And he did not he did not see the wisdom, and so that's when I started looking for other opportunities, and ultimately ended up my first time in LA. This is my second time in LA, but my first time in LA.
What can you say as far as the current job climate right now, and especially someone who may be unhappy, who may want to win an award one day or want to have a different position one day, as far as, taking a leap of faith, because I think that's sometimes what holds a lot of people back. And talk a little bit about that with your experience and where you think the current job climate is now.
Well, my experience is that you have to just do it, but it's not easy. It's for me to say that, oh, gee, I just moved to LA without, and I literally I think I had $100 in my pocket when I did it. I did have a friend that I could stay on her couch for a while, but if you know you want to do something, and if you're focused enough, do your research, find out, what might be available. If you can get a job while you're working, that's great. But that's not always going to happen. So if you have enough confidence in yourself, you just have to kind of hold your nose and jump in the water and say, okay, I'm going to try. And I absolutely have had great good fortune. When I moved to LA, within I think it was like 6 weeks, I ended up with a job on the Del Reese show. But there were no guarantees. It was just, taking my chances. And when you're willing to do that, I've been very blessed. I'll go back to those angels and guides. Whatever forces helped me be able to do it. Eventually, those twists and turns paid off for me, and I was able to do what
What you wanted to do.
I've been very, very fortunate. I don't say good luck wasn't a part of it, because it was.
Let's talk a little bit about the Emmys. We've been talking about that was the catalyst for this book to be written. Talk a little bit about the very first one. Did you win your first one? How many times? Do you remember how many times you were nominated before you actually won? And what did that do to your spirit and to your drive?
I was not able to figure out exactly how many, but I'll throw out a dozen nominations before I actually won. And that's where the title of the book comes from. It's about time, because when I won that Emmy in Chicago, and it was for a show that we did, NBC Salute Chic Chicago. And it was based around the Apparel Center opening next door to the Merchandise Mart. And we did a musical extravaganza, and it was a fashion show, and it was a heck of a lot of fun and very, very big show. And it was when I won the award, I said, "It's been a long time," is what I said. But what I was thinking was, it's about time. That's why I named the book "It's About Time," because it may have been at least a dozen times. Chicago Camera was nominated several times. Small World was nominated several times. Several documentaries were nominated and did not win. So,
how do you think your scope would have been different had you won the very first time that you were nominated?
Oh, Rudy, that's a fabulous question.
Well, thank you.
I don't know what that would have. I think it would have given me a little bit more confidence, but I don't think it would have changed anything in my path. But I honestly don't know. I'll have to think about that one.
Talk a little bit about making that move to New York that very first time, and getting the opportunity and knowing that you were going to have to leave the comforts of home and what you knew to take your career into a new direction.
Well, I already love New York. I had from relatives that I have in New York. What I was doing at that point, I had moved into management at WMAQ, the NBC station in Chicago. And what at that point I was doing was, whenever I knew if I wanted to move the management path, that I had to be willing to go to any station that had the program director's job available. So every time program director's job became available, I applied for it. And fortunately for me, my mentor, a guy named Dick Lobo, had moved to New York as station manager. And eventually, it was a much longer process than this, but I'm shortcutting it for you. Eventually, his program director resigned, and I applied for that job. And after I was turned down in Cleveland, I was turned down in Washington, and those were the two that I had tried before. And then I put my hat in the ring for New York, and I was blessed to get it. So it was just, you kept there was a path. It was a very clear path. You had to look at every station, and you had to apply. I just lucked out that it was New York. Oh my goodness, what a shame! The largest market in the United States. So I was very, very fortunate for that path to take.
Talk a little bit about the mentality, because I think a lot of times people talk about Midwestern values, and especially getting a job, whether it's in Chicago, Milwaukee, somewhere in Indiana, but people have that Midwestern mentality, and they think it's a different mentality going to New York and going to LA. But being a part of all three of those areas, is it the same mentality? Should you kind of shift it around, especially for someone who's thinking about moving from Chicago to maybe pursue an opportunity on one of the coasts?
Oh, that's another great question. You're very good question, Judy. Well, it's interesting. In the thing about LA, and I've never done the station route in LA. Thing about difference between LA and New York is nobody ever tells you no in LA. so if you're pitching a show, which I've done a lot of since I've been on my own, they just kind of keep you strung along. No, everybody's afraid to say no. In New York, they'll say no. So to me, that's a big difference in the mentality. New Yorkers will give you an answer. LA people in the studio segment will string you along. Chicago is its own entity, which all of you know. I mean, Chicago is just there's just, I mean, I think of it as a kinder, gentler place. When I was living with a guy in New York, and whenever we would hire somebody from the Midwest, he was always so impressed at how much more harder they worked. How he's the one who really put the Midwestern work ethic in my consciousness. He always said, let's hire somebody from Chicago because they're gonna. He was also my business partner at the time, because they're going to work harder. And in a lot of cases, it was true.
I want to talk a little bit about your spiritual journey and how that connects to the work that you've done, the work that you continue to do, and maybe how that's reshaping your point of view.
Wow, you're really making me think, Rudy. Thank you. Oh, it's funny. The first time I lived in LA right after Chicago, and then I came back to LA to produce hard copy after when I left New York. And the first time I got very much into all the woo-woo stuff, the psychics and the numerologists and all that kind of thing. And so I became very open to otherworldly things. More recently, I've become very, very conscious of, and I had not really pursued any organized religion for many, many years. I totally respect the religion that I came from. I love my parents, and I did all the organized religion things that my parents did, but it was never a satisfying path for me. And once I discovered a less organized, less dictatorial way of being, I found that much more satisfying for myself. And that's pretty much how I've been for over 20 years now. And one of the things that's very important to me, I believe I'm here with a mission to help people find peace, to help people grow, to help people be their best self. And I've discovered that, and so you don't have enough time for all the different ways I discovered that from, but a woman named Dorothy Lee Donahue gave me some courses in um, Reiki and other things for me to understand how very powerful we all are, and that we all are very, we all know what's best for us, but we sometimes lose the ability to get in touch with that. And one of my missions in life is to help people get in touch with who they are, and that we all have a great deal to offer this world, and that's why we're here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful conversation. There's so many different points from the book to go ahead and chat about. And, such great advice, especially for somebody who is thinking about this field, who's currently in college, someone who's looking to switch jobs or move on up in the industry. I mean, this is such a great resource and gives you such a wonderful perspective from, one of our trailblazers here in Chicago who went to go make a name in New York and California as well, too. So, Karen, thank you so much for your time today.
Rudy, you're terrific. Thank you. This was a delightful interview. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll have the link for to purchase the book on our website and on Amazon here in the post as well, too.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.